Hello, hello, ladies and gentlemen, comedy lovers, and those of you who still think that WhatsApp forwards are peak humor, welcome back to Two Tickets Please. Today we're diving into the wild, the unpredictable, and the occasionally career-ending world of stand-up comedy in India, where one mic, one bad joke, and one angry Reddit thread can end everything. I'm Nalin, your host, and joining me today is someone who is legally obligated to be my co-host for today. She's been on the podcast before, so you know that she's funny, she's insightful, and most importantly, she's willing to be seen in public with me. Welcome to the show, Geetu.
Thank you. I mean, I am legally obligated for sure, but also you're probably legally obligated to continue to invite me to this podcast.
That is true.
You know, where else will I go? So I might as well, be here.
So today we're going to break down how comedy has evolved in India from, those uncle jokes at family functions to now like stand-up specials on Netflix and whatnot. And we'll also then delve into like that fine line of being fearless and whether, stand-up comics in India need to take bigger risks or just get better lawyers. So let's get into it. And right off the bat, I think we should just put it out there. Who do you think, according to you, who is the funniest Indian person and why is it me?
I am, again, legally obligated, as recommended by my legal team, to very clearly, explicitly state that you are indeed the funniest person I know.
Yeah. Did you hear that? Yeah.
And obviously I am the funniest person you know.
Moving on. So actually, what I want to talk about is, when you think back to the 90s, we grew up in the 90s and, our exposure to Indian entertainment, what would be those sources of comedy or things that would make you laugh back in the 90s?
It has to be films. We had such quintessential characters like Paresh Rawal or Govinda. I'm thinking Hera Fairy. I'm thinking, so many slapstick moments with Govinda and all of his films really that set comedy as this real medium, right? This avenue for exploring like funny moments in relationships, in dynamics, in contexts, like Paresh Rawal with the two flatmates, I guess, that he rents the room out to in Hera Fairy.
Oh, yeah.
And just the comedy that ensues in that moment. So I'd say films for me.
Okay, yeah. I agree. I think Govinda was a key one, like in the 90s, like a Govinda film or a David Dhawan film.
Yes.
We're sort of like, oh, this is going to be funny.
Yeah.
And it was very stylistically different, I think, to like, there was a lot of, say, slapstick or even sometimes the jokes that were being made were kind of like very like, fat jokes, skin color jokes, like sort of very appearance or a little bit crude at times, but it was regarded funny. And that's what they sort of tapped into. And it was very popular, right?
True.
And then I think on TV, then maybe in the early 2000s, there was sort of more like comedy through, I guess, like poetry or those like the Great Indian Laughter Challenge, which was like sort of the first exposure I had to Indian stand-up comedy, where people came on stage, just one person in front of a mic, and, they told jokes. So, it feels like where some other places in the world, like maybe in the US or even in the UK, like comedy or the stand-up comedy environment is so much further along. In India, it's still like quite in its like development stage. But I think the trajectory has been really steep, like that curve of where it was 15 years ago and where it is today.
Yeah. Like
this prevalence of comedy in India, the acceptance to a degree of like this being an entertaining thing to go and do with your friends. I think that has been a huge shift. And we're seeing that, I think, probably in the rise of like more names, more comics that we hear of coming up.
Credit to the audience for being so receptive to this as an art form, an alternative way to spend an evening out, right? Yeah. I mean, instead of like going to a concert or watching a movie, catching a comedy show is a really great way to inject some laughter and lightness and humor in an otherwise kind of stressful environment.
Yeah.
And, also the impact that social media has played in putting these really funny, interesting alternative comics in, on our phones. And so we have access to different kind of comedy. So I think we're also curious about, someone who's performing comedy through music and incorporate, I'm thinking Kenny Sebastian and how he incorporates music into his comedy versus someone who's, a little bit more dry. Biswa is a classic example of like someone who's really dry and funny. Yeah. And we're excited to see different forms of comedy as well.
Yeah, that's true. Some of the names that you brought up, I think I know for both of us, have been really sort of instrumental in shaping our affection for Indian comedy. Kenny and Biswa are both great examples. And I think, obviously for me, my number one OG would be Kanan Gill.
Oh my gosh.
Right? I just sort of would watch anything that man does. Yeah.
I saw you in line getting his book signed when we went to watch his show, and you were in awe of like being face to face with him. Yeah. And he was so humble in his receptivity too. Yeah. But he's a really good example of someone who's so thoughtful in his comedy. I wanted to bring up, do you remember we used to watch these shows? It was like Comicstaan.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I was just thinking, they have been such important shows because in a way they educated us about comedy. Like I didn't know there were different like genres of comedy. Yeah. Right? Like observational. Yeah. What else did we see on that show? That
there was really like, comedy through like storytelling, so like
that
narrative,
was a good one.
Right? There's as you said, the improv one. There's like it was sketch comedy as well. So
I have to confess, I think Comicstaan was a real pivotal moment in my interest in comedy. Yeah. Because I think I appreciated it when I started to understand the art and the intentionality. Yeah. I recognized that they weren't just being funny because like, lol, let's laugh at the clown on stage. Yeah. It was really recognizing, actually no, like the way that they've crafted that performance or that set is very intentional. It's so punchy, it's so tight. And that got me really excited. I wanted to know more. I wanted to learn more about how they were, going about their art form. So I really loved that show.
Yeah, I agree. And I think what was really good about Comicstaan was like, when you think about the average sort of Indian family, right? They sit down in the evening in front of their TV to watch shows like Indian Idol or like a dance reality show. So to be able to bring comedy in that format, this is a reality competition series. And so everyone understands the format, but they're like, oh, okay, this is not music or dance, but this is comedy. And so it became inherently like a successful template that you're now introducing a new art form in. And I think that really worked. Obviously, because it was on Amazon Prime, it wasn't on like one of those like mainstream channels. Like, so it would have targeted a different audience, but that's possibly why also I think comedy is probably being received better by the younger demographic in India as opposed to the older demographic, because it is being targeted towards them more as well, right? Yeah. Not just in terms of where it's available, like mostly through the internet on like streaming platforms, but also the kind of language that's being used by these comedians. Most of these comedians are young.
That's true.
Yeah, there's a few people who probably are
very established.
Yeah, established or slightly older, and so will connect to a different audience. Someone like an Atul Khatri, would be like something my parents' age, like they would sort of relate to him. I'd say the majority of comics that we follow are all, millennials. And so that's why the millennial audience and younger.
Millennials also need a lot of escape from, their inner angst and dilemmas. So there's a market there.
Yeah, that's true. One thing that's been interesting I found is that Indian stand-up comedians have kind of taken it upon themselves, perhaps modeled by others, but the good comics, like the ones that I think are performing really well, like some of the names you took, even like Zakir Khan as an example, right? They make it a point to convey some kind of message or some kind of meaningful, idea in their comedy. So it's not just, sometimes it is just, I'm just going to come and make you laugh, which is great, which is what, you're signing up for as a comedy viewer. But a lot of the time, especially in their specials, you're seeing that over the 1 hour period, there's some underlying theme, whether it's about mental health, whether it's about politics, whether it's about something to do with life and society, they're using those opportunities to kind of like shed light on something that means more than just haha.
It almost feels like, they have this relationship with the audience where they've built that rapport, and for them, they have the buy-in from the audience.
Yeah.
And so now they are using that platform to convey different kinds of messages where they're like, look, we can have a nuanced conversation through a very accessible, light, chill medium, art form. And I really like the dance between lightness and, kind of philosophical exploration. That's really fun.
One thing I think that has been in the news recently, and it's not even just recent, but I think it's been around for a little bit of time, is certain comedians have, like, as you'd expect, right? They make political jokes, or they make jokes about topics which can be quite sensitive. And I say the reasoning behind that is that comedy as an art form is designed to kind of push you to a zone where it is a little bit uncomfortable.
Provoke a little bit.
Yeah, because like if you're just going to joke about, there's like a category of jokes which are like animal jokes, like the elephant said this to the mouse.
That is my realm of jokes.
Well, there's an audience for that. I was going to say mostly for kids. but
very vanilla jokes.
Very vanilla and very safe, right?
Yes.
I think perhaps after a period of time when you've had enough exposure, that sort of stuff may not tickle you.
No.
And so as a comedian, you're trying to push the boundary a little bit with your audience. And you wouldn't do it at the start of your show. You'd warm them up, and then midway through, when you feel like, okay, everyone's warmed up, you would introduce some kind of themes or topics, whether they be a little bit dark, whether they be sort of like insult comedy or something, which is, it goes against the norm. It's a little bit unorthodox or a little bit improper, so to speak. But it's kind of part of the art form. And what happens is that when you touch on certain sensitive topics, well, you run the risk of offending a group of people. And so what's happened is that comedians might make certain political statements or jokes, maybe well-intentioned. They probably know what they're talking about. Someone like byeeeee Das is a good example.
Absolutely.
Right? He, through his comedy, will make political statements or use satire to do that, but then can get in hot water. Right? He gets in trouble with either extremist groups or certain political parties, and through channels, essentially, all this pressure gets built. Now, do you think this is necessary? Do you think comedians need to continue to make political statements in their comedy? Like, are we as a society looking for that?
It's such an important exploration, right? I think I see it from multiple perspectives. On the one hand, when we, kind of recognize a artist like byeeeee Das, he has such a well-established, trusted platform. And yes, comedy is his vehicle, but he is an artist, and artists make commentary. It is part of the art of whatever, whether you're a painter, whether you're a writer, that it's if you choose for it to be, it can be a reflection on what's going on in the world. Yeah. And that's probably what lights him up, that's his passion point. And so why should he be restricted from doing that? I think the key here is probably, has it been well thought out? Okay. Has he maybe audience tested some of the jokes or some of the topics he wants to explore? Right. I know that can maybe get into that realm of like, well, does he need to be vetted? Yeah. I agree. I'm open to a debate around that. Yeah. Equally, when you are an artist of that caliber, it is worth doing some of your checks and balances. Sure. So that's one perspective. I think, yes, he absolutely should have the opportunity to speak on, cultural influence and social and incorporate social commentary. There is a responsibility, I think, where, is he open to adding that extra step of just a little bit of vetting?
Yeah, I guess in the recent case, right, where like the India's Got Latent scenario, where there's like a panelist of judges, and their entire job is to literally make light, make fun of the situation, right?
It's that roasting format.
It's a bit of a roasting format, and that's what I guess what the show's USP is. That's what it's been successful for, because audiences have felt like, oh, this is raw, this is unfiltered. We're finally seeing like people being who they are, and it's like, I don't know, maybe oddly relatable or cathartic to finally see something that is not produced or not like so refined. But then, I guess what happened was, Ranveer Allabadia, who is one of the judges, right? He made a statement which...
He's not a comedian.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, he's not a comedian. But he's a podcaster, so he's a public figure. And so he made this statement which was not received well. And it almost seems like the blowback or the aftermath of that has been like massive, right? It's been huge. Perhaps even blown out of proportion a little bit. Yeah.
It seems as if we were waiting for someone to mess up, and then they are the scapegoat for, like the representation of all of this other like comedy and comedians making, edgy, edgy jokes in their art. Yeah. And he just became, I don't know, that like the floodgates opened and they're like, let's attack him.
The particular statement that he made, right? So the statement was like, would you rather have sex with your parents? Oh, sorry. Would you rather see your parents have sex every night or join in once and stop them? Now that's it's sort of like a very immoral thing to ask, some might say, or very uncomfortable question, especially in the context of Indian culture.
Correct.
That said, this exact question has been sort of posed in a public setting before. Someone like Kanan Gill actually had asked this as a joke, obviously, in some kind of press meet or interview many years ago. There's an Australian comedy troupe called the OG Crew. They make like YouTube videos. Okay. And they
has kind of appeared.
This exact same thing appeared there as well.
Got it.
But did not receive the same backlash that it received in this instance.
Yeah.
So do you think there's more to it? Like, is it actually that statement that is offensive, or is it the way, the persona of the person who says it? Is it the setting? Like, what is it that's ticking people off?
It's complex, isn't it?
The statement is what it is, right? I wouldn't necessarily condone that as a question, or I don't think it's particularly funny. The reason that it's gotten all this heat is because it's been regarded as obscene or vulgar. Yeah. And so certain groups or even the police have now sort of come in and I guess charged this incident with that being the crime, that it's too obscene. But like, you watch anything on streaming platforms these days, you watch the cricket, you see your cricketers swearing, right? Yeah. And what are the words that they're using? Like, the insinuations of some of those swear words are exactly the same as this statement. So what I don't understand is, how are we being blind to what's in front of us and just cherry picking like certain people or certain moments and taking offense to that? Because if this is like a thought that is uncomfortable, then it should be uncomfortable in so many different aspects. But it seems to be like, sort of, everyone seems to be blasé about it in other ways.
And he seems to be targeted. Yeah. I'm thinking out loud, and I wonder if, with Ranveer as an example, right, his brand of beer biceps and what he endeavors to achieve through that platform, his conversations, the guests he has on are, they're very intentional conversations, perhaps. Yeah. And I wonder if somewhere we can fall into this trap of really putting someone on a pedestal. And when we do that and we see them in an environment and they, let us down, our reaction is so visceral and so, not forgiving. Of that moment and of that person. And unfortunately, I believe he fell into that he's branded himself as someone who is very thoughtful. And perhaps this was so far against, something that we would perceive as thoughtful that he, really lost a lot of trust and actually evoked a very strong response.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, think of, someone like Jay Shetty making a comment like that.
Yeah.
I wonder if even he would receive that kind of backlash.
Sure.
Right? It's like, I cannot believe he said something like this.
Yeah.
But why are we glorifying him? Where is that like humanization of him? He did something, it didn't land.
Yeah. I think it's one thing for him to have made a really bad joke and us to not like it. That's fair. I think that's fair game in comedy and in most art forms, where someone creates something and you don't like it. I think that's allowed. I think where this becomes a little bit interesting is that what are the repercussions or what are the consequences of this, right? It sort of just makes me think, well, you can make a bad joke. Everyone makes bad jokes, right? And everyone has bad days at work. But the consequences for him,
that's true,
seem so major, and actually it's similar to something that happened recently in Australia. There's a radio host, Marty Sheargold, you know about that, right?
I did hear
about this. Where he made these statements about the Matildas, the women's national women's soccer team, and those statements were quite unfavorable and unsavory, and he lost his job.
Yeah, he was held to account.
And I don't know his history. I don't know if there have been like several instances or a repeated occurrence of transgressions on his part.
Yeah.
But this is a real world consequence where if you make a bad joke, you say the wrong statement, you lose your job. And so I think Ranveer's having the same thing. His is compounded not just by losing his job, because obviously his public perception has been tarnished, but also the fact that, he's got like a police case on him.
Yeah, it's been one of those instances where understandably people had a really strong reaction to it. We were very angry and we're like, what is this? And it kind of seemed like it was a domino effect. And for some reason, like we couldn't let it go. And instead of it kind of diminishing, it escalated even more. And, so that has been quite interesting to observe. The example of Marty is really interesting, right? Because in this instance, perhaps Marty was not speaking in a like comedic environment. He's on public radio. The access to that, who's listening into that conversation is so vast, right? And he has a responsibility to the Australian people to represent people who represent Australia, right? Like the Matildas represent Australia on such a public platform to endorse them, to encourage them. So really, how is Marty using that platform that's not meant to be like a stand-up comedy platform to have meaningful conversation? Whereas on the other hand, India's Got Latent is very clearly a comedy platform. Yeah. Right? We understand that people are going to be roasted here. They've set the tone. Yeah. And yet the escalation on him has been so it's actually like quite fearsome. Imagine being in that situation, having like police come after you, people threatening you. That is like real danger to his life.
Yeah.
Right?
With that comes not just the police case, but also like threats from different groups in society, right?
To people associated with him as well.
Yes.
That's
other people
insane.
Who are, his family or other people on that panel, they've all been sort of targeted to an extent, right? It's interesting because that show, as you said, everyone knows this is that kind of show. The insult comedy is a part of the vernacular. And it's not the first one. You think back to some other popular TV shows that have been on Indian TV, something like Roadies, or even like a Coffee with Karan. Like, why there can be cases made that there's vulgarity or obscenity or insinuation or scandal in those shows too, right? This is on YouTube. It reaches like 20 million people per episode. So a huge audience is watching it. I wonder if there's some kind of bias or prejudice against the YouTubers. or the young people who are making this content, and they're corrupting the minds of individuals.
We like bring them back in line.
Yeah, so I wonder if there's inherently that going on as well by certain privileged authorities. But what I think the real question it brings up here is, are you free to say what you want to say, right? Are you allowed to still express an unpopular opinion? I don't know if that freedom of speech exists in India.
I think the short answer is no. It doesn't, which is why we also hear from a lot of comedians reflect that they find it really challenging to decide whether or not they want to perform in India, as an example. So it's very prevalent, that people are very like, they're kind of really thinking whether or not this would be a good career move, which is really sad. Because it then, speaks to censorship of art. And just because like one thing went a little bit astray, we, now are seeing the entire industry essentially second guessing themselves.
I think that's realistically happening, right? Like some Indian comedians will joke about it, but I think they mean it when they say they are quite afraid of what kind of jokes they might get in trouble for. I think some of them have like PR managers. So what they have to do is like, they write material, they send it to their PR manager, and the manager reads it and it's like, ha ha ha, this is so funny, but you can't include it. Because it'll potentially insult this group or that, or it could be offensive in this way, it could be misconstrued. And so there's already this self-censorship that's happening within the Indian comedy scene. But then when you look at it internationally, like someone like I don't know if you saw this clip come up, but like there was a group of American comedians, one of them being Akash Singh, who's an Indian American comedian, right? And he expressed these sentiments of, well, his audience or his fans ask, well, are you going to ever perform in India? And he feels like he can't because he doesn't think his comedy or his style of performance would be tolerated, right? And so for fear of that, for fear of prosecution, for fear of
being reprimanded.
He doesn't think he would want to go and perform in India. And that's such a shame because that stunts the growth of comedy in general. Like, like we've seen it in other fields. We've seen how beneficial something like an IPL has been. Right? Because diverse people, players, coaches, teams are all sort of playing together and it's growing the sport. But you can't get that with comedy right now in India.
It's like they're taking 2 steps forward and then something happens and it's massive strides back. It's such a setback. And that it's really disheartening to hear when international comedians are also expressing their reluctance to come to India because there's such an opportunity there. And, all things considered, I do believe that the audience is very warm and inviting. So, for them to miss out on building that connection with an audience, but equally for the artist to come and share their craft in India, it's like an exchange, right? It's an exchange of love and trust and rapport and building relationships that we have to kind of like, for the time being, put on hold because we need to do a lot of damage control right now. So in my opinion, I think we are well and truly in the repair era. We've had a major rupture with Ranveer and, India's Got Latent. Similar to what we saw with AIB, they also had a rupture phase. I am hopeful, though. I think I'm an optimistic person. And one of the things that we know about art is that it is so resilient. And artists are so resilient. And I feel very hopeful that comedians will pave a way and find their feet and find their voice again. The truth is that comedy is still, I believe comedy is still very well loved and welcomed in India.
And look, I think worst case, if these comedians need like some kind of support, I think you and I may be called upon.
We have explored bringing this up in the podcast. So,
so I think we need to start writing some material just on the off chance that there's a gap in the market that needs to be filled.
I am ready with a joke though.
Oh.
So
Are you?
You know, if tomorrow my name was picked out of a hat to, you know, get on stage and deliver a punchy one-liner, I think I'm ready.
Okay, but hold on. We have to now sense check this.
We have to vet this.
Yeah.
Okay,
now, is
so
this,
you're my PR manager.
Okay, so firstly, I need to know, this joke, is it going to offend any religious group or political group? Like, what's the risk?
It's a little edgy.
Oh.
Yeah, it is speaking to a very beloved food member.
Food member. Food members, watch
Organism.
out. Okay, food member organisms.
Member of society.
I'm deeply concerned.
Yes.
What, okay, well, look, I'm going to brace myself.
Yes.
I don't know where you're going with this, but I'm ready to hear it.
Lovers of fruit.
Fruit.
For fruit activists.
Okay.
This could be... I'm kind of like a little bit nervous.
Okay, well, I mean, are you prepared to, on this podcast, in front of everyone who'll be watching and listening, are you prepared to tell us this joke? Yeah. Can you...
I'm going to ask for forgiveness.
Okay. All right.
Up front.
You may not get it, but let's hear the joke.
Okay. Nalin.
Yes.
Why was the strawberry late to the party? I know.
Okay. Why was the strawberry late to the party?
Because it was stuck in a jam.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. Heavy.
Thought-provoking.
Wow. Interesting.
Real social commentary.
I would love to know now, as a follow-up question to that masterpiece, is how long have you been sitting on that one? Okay,
this is like my kind of safe joke.
And so that's your joke that you'll just pull out whenever you need
Honestly,
to. Job interviews,
anything.
Professional public speaking
I am
engagements.
genuinely terrified that someone is going to ask me, okay, tell us something funny or make us laugh. And this has happened to me in front of panels in high school where, I was asked to, after a series of very thoughtful questions, was then asked to say something funny, completely froze and blanked.
Right.
And that day vowed that I needed, a very bulletproof, safe joke.
Okay. Right.
And it caters to all audiences. I can tell my nephew about it.
Yeah.
I can tell my parents. I can share this joke with my parents.
Yeah.
Like you said, bring it up in a job interview situation.
Yeah.
It is context appropriate.
Yeah. I think the only issue you're going to face now is everyone's heard it.
Yes.
Because, as you know, our podcast gets, millions of views.
That's it.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. So you've got...
And I'll tell it again. So, I appreciate that you're...
Do you want to tell it again now?
This is how it goes.
Oh, okay.
No.
This is a 2-time listening experience. I see.
What I'm saying is that I will, if, you've heard it from me before and you ask me again to tell you a joke, it is the only one that I will say. Oh,
so you're a one-trick pony.
Yes.
I see.
Yes.
Okay. So
and if we,
the tank is empty.
Tank is very full because I think it's a joke that lands every time.
I see. Okay.
See, you're laughing. Even just the thought of the strawberry being stuck.
Can you tell it again? Maybe I don't think I fully understood the gravitas.
Now then, picture this.
Okay.
Close your eyes.
Oh yes. All right.
Red, juicy strawberry, sweet, with just a little bit of.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you picturing the strawberry?
Sure.
Why have you opened your eyes?
Sorry, it's just too graphic. I can't, But yeah, no, go ahead.
Okay. Why was the strawberry late to the party?
Why was the strawberry late to the party?
Because it was stuck in a jam.
Oh, interesting. Oh, there's a whisper there.
Yeah.
Almost like a secret.
So, I do that. I'll do a
you mix up
little
the
bit
performance.
Yeah.
Okay. You're an improv comedian.
I am.
Oh, excellent.
Improv, but you expect the same every time.
Well, that's great.
So it's expected improv.
Okay. Expected improv. This is a new form of comedy. We haven't heard of.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Fantastic. Well, congratulations on that. And to all of the listeners and watchers who have been privileged to hear that joke.
You'll probably hear it
condolences.
again.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, that really shapes this conversation. I think we've gotten everything out of it now. But thank you for, of course, that wonderful joke, but also for enlightening us with such insights about Indian comedy. And yeah, I want to know who you're keen to watch next, because we've seen a few. We've seen Karnish Talwar, we've seen Prashasti Singh, Kanan Gill. You know, we've seen quite a few in person. But is there one comedian who you haven't watched live that you're like definitely want to?
I am so excited to watch Shrija. I have watched so many of her like clips and bits on social, and there are some that are just so funny.
Okay, yeah.
So I think she would be amazing to catch.
Yeah.
Not an Indian comic, but I'm also a really big fan of Taylor Tomlinson.
Oh yeah.
I think she would be so funny to watch.
True.
And I hope one day I also would love to be in the audience for a Hassan Minhaj show.
Oh.
I think he
high
is
energy, manic.
So high energy.
Yeah,
You're just like on, the edge of your seat the entire time.
Yeah.
I think he'd be so funny.
Okay. Nice.
How about you? Who are you excited to see?
Okay, so controversial opinion.
Oh.
But I actually am curious to watch Samay Raina live. I really admire his talent. I think he's super witty.
Yes.
And I like that. I like where he brings in the surprise element, because like
he's a little bit unfiltered, like appearing to be unfiltered.
Yeah, now I do think some of his comedy is a little bit dark.
Yeah.
So it's an acquired taste. But apart from him, I've never watched Zakir Khan live. So that'd be interesting. Also, Uruj Ashfaq.
Yeah, she's so funny.
Yeah, I would love to see her too. But let's see, maybe at the Edinburgh Fringe later this year, if any of these comics come up, maybe we can check them out.
That would be fun.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll sign off here. So thank you, everyone, for dialing in and listening to us go off about all kinds of things related to strawberries and jams, but more importantly, Indian comedy and stand-up in India, and whether freedom of speech exists. Because maybe it doesn't, but we're kind of optimistic and hopeful that comedians in India will continue to get opportunities and will continue to benefit from all of the wonderful laughs that are out there for us. So, Geetu, what should our audience do?
Firstly, grab a bowl of strawberries.
Okay, you're really honing into this strawberry thing. Like, I thought we had moved on, but you're no. Okay.
I mean, spring is upon us. I don't know. It's actually, are strawberries a spring fruit or a winter fruit?
I think you guys should tell us a better joke. So I think let's give that as a takeaway. Everyone,
homework.
Write a joke that is better than Geetu's.
Yes, and I will see if it is, something I can add to my arsenal of jokes.
Oh, this is an audition.
This is.
Okay, so everyone, you're writing jokes now for Geetu.
Yes.
And Geetu, if you like the joke,
you can be my ghost writers.
And if you like the joke, all right, you're gonna have to deliver it. We're gonna film you.
Oh.
You're gonna have to deliver it. And the winning joke will credit the person who writes it. But
is this my journey to being cancelled?
Possibly.
Oh, God.
But what are the parameters? So it has to be one or two lines.
Yep. Nephew to grandparent.
So family friendly.
Yep.
And it's got to be something that is easy to remember, but also doesn't offend anyone.
That's it.
Okay. So the perfect joke.
The perfect joke.
All right. So everyone, write the perfect joke. Put it in the comments. We can't wait to read them. But in the meantime, share this, like this, subscribe, so we can continue to offer you guys a lot more entertainment in episodes to come. We'll be back soon again with something completely different, but definitely ticket worthy. So thank you, Geetu, for dialing in, and we'll see you all in the next one.
Bye.
Bye.